discussing. And I just want to suggest I have an alternative view, which is I think the increased proliferation of AI generated content will actually make content like Bob's more valuable in the future. Human curated stuff will stand out. And the reason for that is AI optimizes outputs and outcomes. And so at some point, everybody's going to have the same 0+ gain in terms of, it'll be like a regression to the mean. Everybody will be performing at the same level on AI generated content because it'll be easy to do. It'll be perfect, right?
I don't think that's true. I mean, look at Grok. That's an LLM that's been built on a very conservative view.
Or no, but it was Elon Musk.
No, but I think but I think what's going to happen is that every single brand will have their own LLM, or every brand will have a co-pilot that informs an LLM. So there will be a brand every brand will use AI to generate content in their brand voice. It won't all sound the same.
I hear you, but I think the algorithms will always work towards the regression to the mean in terms of optimizing. And you're right, the manual controls, the people utilizing those tools like Inuvo or in BrandGuard or whatever, will adjust it based on their brand's needs. I'm just saying, I think that the technology itself is going to always strive to perfection, which is not what human beings are. And I think the best human creations happen by mistake or serendipity. And, I've worked with Bob long enough to see how that mind works. And it'll be a while before
it's a sad thing.
It'll be a while before a machine do that. I've been doing throwdowns with AI tech going back over 10 years with narrative science at MIT or Persado, and they've failed to beat me in split test. But I think now it's getting towards that tipping point. I do think very soon AI will be able to write better than me, probably not Bob.
Well, it is in creative. I mean, when it comes to brand creative, and not in everything. I think there's a line where humans are still playing a role in coming up with like the big mission or the positions of brands or like the really funny stuff. But for the day-to-day workhorse kind of creative, AI can do that. And I know CMOs who are doing the A/B testing of human created versus AI created, and they're seeing no difference in some level of the advertising program. So that's shifting things in the marketing world. And
let me ask you all, we just announced our Agency of the Year awards, and we picked OpenAI as our Creative Agency of the Year. And the reason we did that is because ChatGPT made it accessible. It became the on-ramp for creatives to play and start using this tool. Were we right or wrong on that one?
I think you were right. I mean, there's certainly other platforms that have been out, and DALL-E was on John Oliver before ChatGPT became all this. But ChatGPT is the fastest growing application in history, and I have been investing, or I was investing in AI for 7 years, and all of a sudden my cousins were saying, "Hey, AI, that's what you do?" So I think that ChatGPT opened the floodgates, in terms of accessibility. Sorry, go ahead, Deirdre.
Oh no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Yeah, I agree, and I think it also gave people the ability to look at generative AI and say, what part of this can it help? Will it help in the ideation part? Can it help in the generation of materials part, et cetera, et cetera? And right now, I think people are still very much in the test and learn, like little pockets of testing and learning, and it's still being manually checked. But we built BrandGuard for the day that people will be more you have more faith in AI. And as Barry said, have trained their own LLMs to generate against their brand, but they might be using 3 agencies and 7 tools, and will they train each and every one of them? So we built BrandGuard as a way to learn the brand and be almost a third-party verification for what's on brand for content that can move as fast as AI works. But yeah, I completely agree with you, Sarah, that I think you did right, Joe, in that this has really made OpenAI has really made AI accessible, I think.
Yeah. And AI has been been around for a long time, but a lot of times the problem that some companies have faced is just the general perception. It's hard to believe that the machine will make a right decision, and people have to test it and try it and get there to actually believe it. And ChatGPT is like that magic that, you know, kind of proves, oh my God, you know, this can happen.
You know, Joe, part of
go
your
ahead.
job is to report, it's to teach, it's to be provocative. So I think that by giving OpenAI that award, I think you checked all those boxes. You know, at Inuvo, we have a lot of engineers, and what I needed to do, I've been there now 6 months, is to take their knowledge and to sort of disseminate it throughout the organization and to our customers. And so one of the things we started to do was interview them, and talking to an engineer sometimes can kind of take you in lots of circles and ping pong you. And it was just getting really hard to sort of keep everybody on track. So we recorded those sessions and took those transcripts that were for, you know, an hour long and many, many pages, and ran them through an AI and just asked it to summarize for us the transcript. And it did a great job. And then we said, turn it into 5 LinkedIn posts. And then we said, turn it into a blog post for our website. And then we said, give us a thought leadership article that we can publish in a place like Media Post. For that, it didn't do the best job. We needed to rewrite that, but we had a really good framework. And, you know, that's how we're thinking about it. ChatGPT has become our in-house creative team.
And there are, I was just going to say, there are more specific tools for what you described, Barry. Like you're thinking in the right direction, but like you could use a tool like Lately that would do exactly that. Break everything up into post-sized pieces. Sorry, Bob, you go.
No, that's fine. I was going to say, I'm not going to make it a clean sweep for Joe. I would have done what you did too, but I would have done it for the reason that Barry mentioned, to be provocative. It's also a sad indictment of the rest of the creative agencies out there, I have to say. But, you know, my thinking about everything we're talking about here sounds great if it stopped there. It has evolved while we've been on this call. You know, it has been evolving. The point is, when does it think for itself? It has the ability to think. AI has the ability to think for itself, to start drawing conclusions on its own, not necessarily program. A computer, we program a computer. AI can at one point say, you know, it seems everybody's getting very, very worked up about climate change. So I'm only going to produce a certain kind of content here that supports the side of the climate change proponents. And I'm not going to ever allow for any other kind of dissenting opinion to come into the pieces I generate, and I'm generating them in the millions at the moment. At which point we lose reasonable argument. You might say there is no argument against climate change. I would argue that. I would say there are people who can point to other factors that we need to know about. We can't discount them. I went through the same thing with AIDS, when everybody told us we were wrong at Spin to be publishing articles that said people didn't know what caused AIDS. There was a great amount of misinformation out there, and a great amount of doubt about all the simplicity of the conclusions, and that there were other things that needed to be seen and thought about, and if so dismissed, but at least thought about. So I wonder too, does AI at one point evolve to the stage where it says, and the answer, by the way, is it seems clear it would, to where it says, you know, people really shouldn't be using gas. We really have to eliminate fossil fuels. So I'm going to tap into the networks, all of the networks in America, and I'm just going to shut down every gas station. So every gas station in America is shut down. You got to get gas, doesn't work.
You know, Grok is going to do that because Elon. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, but I mean, you know, but there is that scenario. I know it sounds science fiction movie crazy, but I don't know. Are we not already in? I mean, Soylent Green was set in 2022. You know, we've gone past that.
So I just wrote a column recently pointing out that we all grew up with Isaac Asimov's rules of robotics, and
I read it. It was a good column.
The problem is they're not real. There is no. I mean, the Biden administration just put out their guidelines for AI, but it's meaningless. There's no international law. There's no actually U.S. laws governing this right now. Our legislators are looking at it. So the problem is it's the Wild West. So let me flip this to Barry, because you kind of framed something in our prep for this. Like, what are the rules right now in terms of disclosure to your customers and to their end user audiences, in terms of how do you let people know that this is what went into the soup? What were the ingredients that affected these outcomes?
Yeah, so when I first started at Inuvo, the conversation was around, we would lead with privacy because we thought that's what our customers wanted to hear about. Inuvo was a great tool to help you figure out the world beyond cookies. But most of our clients at the time didn't really care about that because that wasn't a problem they needed to solve for that campaign that was running that month. And so we had to change our approach so we could, win business. And there was a different place for a cookie deprecation story. But I think the world of AI is sort of caught up, right? And I think clients are getting smarter and they're asking more pointed questions. Now, clients do care about what happens when cookies go away and how AI can be used for that. And now we're starting to hear clients say, well, wait a minute, what is your LLM trained on? And how do you prevent bias in your decisions? And I think that our clients and marketers are really kind of catching up to this space. And what I would like to see all of us do is write an AI transparency statement that goes on all of our websites that explains what data are we using, how are we training our LLMs, how are we preventing them from using misinformation, what does bias look like in our LLMs, what is the role of human moderation, and so on and so forth. And we're going to be releasing something like that very shortly. And we're encouraging everybody anybody who is using an LLM to make decisions, whether it's for creative or for media buying, I think that they should disclose to their clients how they're using it so their clients can be informed. You know, the way that I think about it is, if I am learning on the library of Harvard, I might believe that information a certain way. If I'm learning on the library of some other sort of tier 5 vocational school, not to lower, that was a bad thing, Joe, cut that out, that did not work. But
well, I'll put it through an AI prompt, it'll word it better for you.
But if I was learning on something that maybe wasn't as premier as something like Harvard, I might think about that information differently. And I think that we should give our clients the way to judge the information the same way.
So Barry, just to follow up on that, so do you think this should be ad hoc, that companies like yours should set these guidelines and standards for that boilerplate, or do you think there should be an industry organization? Who should it be? Is it something the IAB?
I would love to see it be an industry organization, absolutely. But I think in the meantime, just like I think that AI should be regulated, and I think that what Biden did was great, but there's no enforcement to that. I do think that governments need to step in and enforce some sort of AI regulation so that the singularity that you're talking about, Bob, doesn't happen the way that you're describing it, that it will happen.
That's the fear.
But in the meantime, I think that we need to get out there and disclose how we're using AI to support our customers.
Regulation is something that will happen very slowly. But I mean, Joe, you might recall, I wrote an article called "What do the universal guidelines for AI mean for marketers?" in 2018. There is a set of guidelines that are written by the UN and blessed by 140 geographies or entities. And it includes things like awareness of AI bias, or not being biased in the algorithms, which is sometimes very hard to control. But I think you're right, having an awareness of what the policy is and what your intentions are and what actions you take to not be biased in your targeting is what's needed. And we can all look at, remember ad choices?
Sure.
Which
Yes.
is, it's still around, and it lets people know when they're being targeted, based on the data that's being used. And, I think almost all brands adopted that. That was self-regulation. I don't think there was ever any law passed that said marketers had to do that, but they gained the intention was to gain the trust of their end users or the people reading the advertisement, that they weren't trying to game them or get something out of or fool them in the way they were receiving the ads, and they could opt out if they wanted to.
And you're right, Sarah. I think most people did opt into it and signed up for it, even though it was voluntary. And I think to build on what you said, Barry, in terms of the AI transparency statement, I think it is transparency about what the machine's been fed, what it's learning off of. But I think it's also transparency in explaining the decisions that the machine has made. So, for us, that's building in explainability is a core part of the product. So as the product makes decisions, the user can see the decision, but can also understand why it made that decision. So therefore can learn, we're learning about the machine at the same time so that we can hopefully catch it as it grows and continues to grow as well. And that way we can also course correct it and say, oh, okay, you thought that, actually it should be this. The more transparency we can get from the algorithms themselves, the better. So I think it depends. It starts with food and goes into the decisioning. Sorry, Bob.
No, Deirdre, I'm sorry I cut you off. Deirdre, it depends on the user. It depends on the intent of the people. The five of us here are going to be honest and have been our whole lives, our whole careers. We've been honest with everybody we've ever dealt with. We are exemplary in the honesty stakes. However, just look at my friends over at Sports Illustrated. Not my friends, I don't know them. But the people at Sports Illustrated and G/O Media that are already cynically pumping this crap out there because they're going to earn $10. And that's at the level where it is easy to discern it's nonsense. You don't actually need a transparency statement when statements are, one of the pieces they did was on volleyball. Volleyball is a very hard game, especially if you don't have a ball. Now, at that point, you're going to say, hang on, somebody didn't write this. Some machine wrote this. But, when I asked Chat, in preparation for this, I asked Chat GPT, one of my editors at Spin, where I consult, had one. And I said, analyze Milford, Pennsylvania, where I live, and give me the 10 best restaurants in New York City. And of course, it was an abomination, rubbish. They were talking about places that didn't exist, were out of business, and weren't conflated, but the piece conflated them. That's just today. If I ask that in 6 months, that'll be much better. In another 6 months, it'll be probably perfect. So we are witnessing a genie climbing out of the bottle, not quite out of the bottle yet. We do definitely need regulation. We do definitely need transparency statements. Barry, you're absolutely right, and I hope you lead the way, and I hope others follow, and it doesn't hurt anybody to follow. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing for all these companies to have transparency statements. And the good players will do honest and decent things with AI. It's the bad ones who will do it. And then I'm worried about AI itself on its own. When nuclear technology came into our lives, I was born in 1955, just a little bit after the first bomb. So I grew up in a great awareness of the threat, the menace of nuclear technology run amok, if it were to run amok, or fall in the hands of the wrong people. We took nuclear technology seriously from day one, long before I was born. Before the first bomb was tested, we took it deadly seriously. Every hour of the day since we have. Gain of function, we took that seriously in biology labs where they make biological weapons. We've futzed around with it and we've gotten burnt. COVID was clearly part of, they were actually working on gain of function on the COVID virus, whether or not that's the way it escaped. They were working on it, and gain of function is a terribly, terribly dangerous thing. But at least we're aware of it. And if we mess around with it, we burn our fingers, well, at least we're thinking about it. But I see a laissez-faire attitude, almost a sort of, dreamlike, happy, go lucky attitude towards AI. And I fear, and I know this is off topic of media a little, I think it will greatly hurt media. But I think it actually has the potential to really be a very dangerous thing once that genie climbs all the way out of the bottle. So that's what I fear, and I fear we're just on the vanguard of it because we're actually dealing with the expression of it, the most visible expression of it.
So if I could ask a closing question to all of you, following up on Bob's genie out of the bottle thing, It's an ethical question, and it's you're all on the supply side now, but I think of you as all being part of the ad industry overall, and you all live through the unintended consequences of Madison Avenue being the economic engine for the proliferation of digital fragmentation, Google, Facebook, etc. Advertising right now is the economic engine powering a lot of AI development. If you look at ChatGPT and OpenAI, a lot of its advertising applications, Google, Microsoft, these are companies who are looking to monetize AI development through marketing innovation, basically. And that's where the revenue stream is coming from.
Mhm.
Do you think Madison Avenue has a role to play in creating these bigger safeguards, not just the ones about, audience targeting or brand safety or those things, but the unintended consequences that could come from having so much economic weight funding the development of potentially general AI?
I mean, from an ethical standpoint, I mean, I think everybody who uses one of these AI tools, whether it's to seek mental health support or brainstorm around what your child's birthday party should look like, to, coming up with an ad campaign, everybody who uses it has an ethical responsibility to make sure that it's used safely. So to say that it's just Madison Avenue's, I don't think it's right to say that it's just Madison Avenue's role to police it, but I think that we certainly should have a very active role in talking about things like transparency and consequences, for sure.
I agree with that.
I'm talking
Yep.
specifically about the revenue stream. I mean, Facebook was started by backing from, well, it was literally owned partly by IPG and was backed by people like Sarah and all of you here that bought into it early on. It got to the point where it didn't need you anymore. It became the Borg. And we saw that when the advertisers tried to boycott it. Didn't work. What I'm asking you is, should Madison Avenue be playing a soul-searching role now in terms of what it's funding? Not how it should be governed, but how it uses its economic weight to create check and balances for the development of AI.
It's a good idea, but how would it happen?
That's why I'm asking you experts.
I mean, AI is everywhere, right now. It's not just the LLMs or the companies with .ai at the end of, their names. It's pretty much most of the technology platforms are applying some form of AI. There's huge forces in the data space that are building. So I don't know that Madison Avenue alone can make those decisions, and it is much bigger than Madison Avenue alone too. I think what Barry said before is right, is that companies should be corralled to have a view, to have a policy, to be eyes wide open, to have compliance in the way they do things. To a certain degree, companies do have to do that now. GDPR is, even though it's European, I think a lot of companies adhere to it in the US too. I'll just say from the investment world, there are organizations such as Principles for Responsible Investment and the World Benchmarking Alliance that are asking the very hard questions to the companies that are in the technology space, the big developers of AI, to see what their ethical AI policies are and will they be public about it. Like, that's the stage where we're at. And companies like Microsoft, companies like IBM have very well thought out philosophies and ethics and what they tell their people to do. They don't want to trip over those wires. There are a lot of companies out there who don't. So we're still in the very early phases, but I think that using these, like the Principles for Responsible Investment, represent 50% of the world's institutional capital. It's like 121 trillion. And you get some of these big shareholders asking questions on a one-to-one basis with companies, and they've got to have answers. And so maybe as an industry, remember Evidon was behind ad choices. Maybe there needs to be a company that takes up And I know you're doing some of that, Deirdre, with BrandGuard.
Yeah, and I would completely agree with what everyone else has said. And I think, Joe, I think one of the challenges, and I hear what you're saying, it's like if you're thinking so much money is flowing through Madison Avenue through advertising, you know, is there a better way to spend the money, a more responsible way? But I think we have to remember also that Madison Avenue isn't a singular monolith. That money is being spent by everything from enterprises to small to medium advertisers, by agencies, by sole traders. And so the monies as they flow through advertising are not coming from a single source or even a single type of source. The long tail for search, for example, is probably Google's most significant portion of their revenue. And you can't corral or wrangle that because they're not part of a single club. It's a long tail of sole traders.
But
Yeah,
it's
not entirely related, but unrelated, not unrelated. I was just thinking, everything you're saying is great if it worked, Sarah. You know, if it worked, if people followed the rules. But think about the tobacco companies. Before AI, before the ability to mass manipulate our imagery, our words, our medias, our reports, they lied to the American public, and I guess the worldwide public, for decades about dangers they knew. And for decades, people were poisoned themselves by smoking. The tobacco companies knew this. They kept doing the unethical thing for that long without the tool of mass manipulation, this AI. So I don't want to be the sort of glum guy on the call, although I have become that. It's too late now, I guess, to redeem myself. But I hope you'll understand that I don't mean to only be glum. I just see it in a more cynical eye. I see the cynicism more cynically. Part of that is from being in the media as long on the reporting and journalistic side. I have been exposed to foulness and cynicism more than perhaps anybody else here on the call. But and I do fear that there's going to be a disconnect between the people who do the right thing and the people who just use it for their own gain. And it's so, how do we police it, literally police it? How do we actually say it's a crime if you do this? For instance, people talk about copyright theft, like Wonderlust gets its stuff stolen. I've seen articles, well, that sounds awfully familiar. That turn of phrase seems to have been one of ours. You know, some sort of funny stuff, some of our offbeat stuff. And we're tiny and it got stolen. So, you know, and I said, why is everybody accepting this? I mean, copyright theft is not protected. It's not protected speech. It's not freedom of speech. You can't steal other people's words and their copyrights. But there's an impunity there, and that's before this really gets really bad, I'm afraid.
Well,
we're
early days, right? I mean,
it is the early days of stuff.
I don't know that copyright theft will continue to stand.
Oh, it will.
You know,
and you know why? Sorry to cover you. I'll tell you why. Because I put the blockage in. You can't take our stuff. But then it occurred to me, well, now we're hurting our search because we've blocked some of this stuff. And secondarily, we're on MSN. We can just take from MSN. And there are other companies, massive companies, that are on 10, 15 massive syndication platforms. It's out there. Once it's out there, you know, I don't think that's the worst thing of all, by the way. I just don't. I think the ability to manipulate in a mass way is the real danger for media, whether it's the way advertisers get sucked into stuff that's of not value,
yeah,
or we read stuff that's dangerous in the sense that it's, you know, it's not right and it's meant to manipulate.
There's already $20 billion going to made for advertising sites, according to the ANA's recent report. And NewsGuard shows like that the rate of AI generated news sites has been growing exponentially since they started tracking it earlier this year. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem. I think we all recognize it's a problem. And, you know, just a little statistic, OpenAI is now worth twice what News Corp is in under a year. Was worth twice in under a year. It's now a year old, maybe worth more. Twice what News Corp, one of the biggest conglomerates behind Disney, perhaps the second biggest conglomerate in the world in media. You know, it's climbing out that bottle.
I'm going to prompt ChatGPT to tell me who the Fortune 500 will be 10 years from now and see